The slave market smelled like sweat, dust, and sadness. Hundreds of cages once filled the square, but now only one remained. Inside it sat a small alien girl-thin, dirty and silent. Her silver skin was bruised, her white hair tangled like old rope. A heavy metal collar circled her neck, connected to thick chains that rattled when she moved. The auctioneer didn't bother to call for bids anymore. Everyone had already left or bought stronger, prettier, or more useful slaves. This one she was just left behind. She's broken, a guard had whispered earlier. No one will take her, not even for free. The girl kept her eyes on the ground. She didn't cry, didn't beg, didn't even speak. She had stopped hoping long ago. Suddenly, footsteps echoed in the quiet square. Not heavy like a soldier's, not rushed like a buyer's. Just slow, steady steps. The girl didn't look up, assuming it was another guard checking the empty area, but the footsteps stopped right in front of her cage. Is this one still for sale? A calm voice asked. The auctioneer blinked in surprise. A human man stood there, middle-aged, with gray streaks in his beard and dust on his boots. He wore a long brown coat and carried no weapons. He didn't look like a slave master or a bounty hunter. He looked ordinary. She? The auctioneer scoffed. She's useless, can't speak, weak bones, refuses to obey commands. He kicked the cage lightly, making the girl flinch. She's not worth the collar she's wearing. The human crouched down slowly, looking into the cage. The girl finally lifted her eyes, just a little. His face wasn't cruel, not amused either, just quiet, thoughtful. Their eyes met for a second, and something shifted in the air. How much? He asked. The auctioneer laughed. You serious? Very, the man replied, still looking at the girl. The auctioneer shrugged. 1 credit. Or take her for free if you carry her yourself. The man stood and took out a single coin from his pocket. He handed it over without a word, and pulled out a key. Wait, the auctioneer said. You're not even going to ask what species she is. The man didn't answer. He walked to the cage, unlocked the door, and knelt again. The girl didn't move. She thought this was a trick, or maybe the start of something worse. But he didn't grab her, didn't pull the chain. He just sat down. A piece of bread and a small water bottle inside the cage. Then he spoke softly. Come when you're ready. And then he walked away and sat by a nearby bench. The girl stared at the bread. Her hand shook as she reached for it, then pulled back. Her stomach hurt from hunger, but her heart hurt more from fear. She waited 10 minutes. The man said nothing, just looked at the sky. She waited 20. He stayed still, not even glancing at her. Finally, after 30 long minutes, the girl crawled out of the cage. She dragged her chain behind her, each step painful, each breath sharp. She sat at a safe distance, but closer than before. She ate the bread slowly, sipping the water between small bites. The man watched her out of the corner of his eye. He didn't smile, didn't frown, just stayed quiet. After she finished eating, she looked at him again. Her lips moved slightly, but no sound came out. She hadn't spoken in years, not since her owners first broke her voice, trying to train her. What's your name? He asked gently. Silence. That's okay, he said. We'll figure it out later. The sun was starting to set, turning the sky orange and gold. The man stood up and took out a blanket from his bag. He placed it near her and pointed to a small ship parked nearby. I'm leaving in 10 minutes, he said. If you want a second chance, come with me. Then he turned and walked away again. This time, he didn't look back. The girl sat frozen for a long time. No one had ever given her a choice before. No one had ever waited or been kind, or fed her without asking something in return. She looked at the cage behind her, then at the ship in front of her, and finally at the man who now stood at the ramp, waiting silently for the first time in years. She took a step forward, then another, and another. The chains still dragged behind her. But her eyes were no longer looking at the ground. She didn't know who this human was, but somehow she felt he had just saved her from something worse than death. From being forgotten forever, Asterisk, the ship hummed softly as it drifted through the stars. Inside, everything was clean, quiet, and calm. The alien girl sat near the wall, hugging her knees, afraid to touch anything. Her chains had been removed, but their weight still lingered on her skin. The human Reed moved around the ship without saying much. He gave her a warm drink in a metal cup and placed soft clothing on the bench. Beside her, he didn't ask questions, didn't make her talk. He just let her be. The girl had no name anymore. Not one she remembered. Her last masters called her Thing. Property, and worse, Reed didn't call her anything. Not yet at night. She didn't sleep. She kept one eye open, waiting for the pain to start. That's how it always worked, before kindness first, then cruelty. But morning came, and she was still safe. That scared her even more. Reed was not like other humans she had seen. He didn't smile much, but when he did, it wasn't fake. He didn't touch her. Not even once. Even when she spilled her drink. He just cleaned it up silently and brought her another. "Do you want to see the stars?" he asked one day. She flinched at the sound of his voice, then nodded, very slowly. He led her to the cockpit. The windows opened wide, showing a glowing field of light and colors outside. Purple clouds floated in space like ocean waves, and tiny moons spun in slow circles. Her mouth opened slightly, not in fear, but in wonder. "It's called the Drellin Passage." Reed said, "I used to fly through it on delivery runs." She didn't answer, but her eyes sparkled in the reflection of the stars. That sparkle, Reed noticed it. It wasn't just light. There was something deep inside her, something waiting to come alive again. Later, he placed a small device on the table. "This is a translator," he said. "If you ever want to speak, it'll help." She stared at the device, then at him, confused. "No rush," Reed said gently. "Only if you feel safe." Safe. That word felt strange, like a dream she had long forgotten. She tried the translator late that night when Reed was asleep. Her voice came out cracked and broken. She whispered one word, again and again, until it didn't hurt anymore. Safe, safe, safe. Days passed, maybe weeks. She still didn't talk much, but her eyes followed Reed wherever he went. She began sitting closer, first across the room, then near the table, then on the other side of the couch. Reed had noticed the scars on her back. They weren't just physical, they were burned in patterns. Marks from a slave brand. He said nothing. Never stared, never asked, but inside he felt something heavy and dark growing gur. One night, she brought him a bowl of food. She didn't cook, it just warmed it up like he had shown her. She placed it in front of him and sat quietly beside the door. Reed looked at the bowl, then at her. "Thank you," he said, surprised. She nodded, her fingers twisting nervously in her lap. That night something changed, not with words but with trust. She didn't flinch when he walked past her. She didn't hide her face anymore. She even tried to speak again using the translator. "My name," she said slowly, "is..." "I forgot." Reed leaned forward gently. "We'll find a new one," he said. "Something that belongs only to you." She looked at him, eyes wide, unnew. "Yes," he said. "Not what others gave you," for the first time. Her lips curled into the smallest smile. But peace never lasts long in space, not for a human carrying a slave marked for death. Unmarked ships had begun to follow them through star lanes, no identification, no transmissions, just silent watchers in the dark. Reed noticed them, and so did she. Her body tensed every time the radar beeped. Someone was searching for her. Someone who didn't want her alive. Late one night, she asked him through the translator, "Why did you buy me?" Reed paused, staring out at the stars. He didn't answer right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft but firm, because no one else did. He said, and that wasn't right. She stared at him for a long time, not understanding everything he meant, but feeling it deep in her chest, a strange warmth, like hope. But outside the ship, danger moved closer, and the girl who had once been called worthless was about to become the center of something far greater than either of them could imagine. Reed was used to quiet, but this quiet felt strange. It wasn't fear anymore. It was something else, like the air around her had started to change. The girl sat by the window again, her eyes locked on the stars, but tonight her skin glowed. Faintly under the moonlight of a nearby planet, just a soft shimmer, like light passing through crystal water. Reed noticed it but said nothing. He had seen strange things in space, but never like her. One day, while she was resting, he scanned the old metal collar he had removed from her. It wasn't standard slave tech. There were deep symbols carved inside Delian markings, old and complex. He took a picture and ran it through his ship's translator. The results shocked him. Subject class: Solari, high clearance only, do not release. Solari, the name sounded familiar. He searched deeper through ancient data logs, private archives, and forgotten records. There was almost nothing. Just one broken file. Solari, extinct or hidden, believed to carry neural energy strands, dangerous when matured. Reed leaned back in his chair, his fingers stiff. He looked at her sleeping form across the room. She wasn't just a slave. She was something else, something rare, maybe even powerful. But someone had tried hard to erase that history. Erase her. The girl woke slowly, blinking in the dim lights of the ship. Reed walked over and knelt beside her. Have you ever heard the word Solari? He asked gently. She stared at him, silent. Then her eyes widened, not with fear, but confusion. She shook her head slowly. I don't know, she whispered, but it feels familiar. Her voice cracked when she spoke, but Reed noticed something. When she said the word Solari, her body trembled slightly. Not from pain, but like her nerves were reacting to the sound itself. That night, she had a dream. She didn't tell Reed, but she saw images, shining towers, glowing stones, and voices calling her name. A name she couldn't remember, but it was there, just out of reach the next day. Reed handed her a small bracelet. It's a neural stabilizer, he explained. It might help you control whatever's happening. She took it slowly, slipping it over her wrist. The moment it clicked in place, her body relaxed. The glow under her skin faded. Her eyes stopped burning, and for the first time, she took a deep breath without shaking. Thank you, she said quietly. Two simple words, but they hit Reed like a storm. That same evening, a message pinged on his private channel. Cryptid, untraceable. Just one line. Return the girl or face extermination. No signature, no location, just cold threat. Reed stared at the screen, fists clenched. Who were these people? Why did they want her gone so badly? He looked at her again, sitting near the cockpit window, staring into space. She didn't look dangerous. She looked small, fragile, like someone who had already been through too much. But maybe that's why they feared her. Maybe they couldn't control her, so they called her worthless and sold her off like trash. Reed knew now, this wasn't just about kindness. This was war. A quiet war fought in shadows, in secret auctions, in silent systems, and she was at the center of it. Later, as he checked their route, he noticed another ship following. No ID, no signals. Just always a few clicks behind them, never attacking, just watching. He turned off the lights in the cockpit and stood near her. They're tracking us, he said. They want you back. Her fingers gripped the chair tightly. Why me? She asked. I'm no one. Reed shook his head. No, they just made you think that. She didn't cry, she didn't scream, but in her silence, Reed saw something growing, not fear strength that night. He heard her whisper to herself, through the thin walls, my name is not thing. My name is not worthless. My name is... Then silence again, like the rest of her truth was still locked inside. But Red knew one thing. She wasn't what she seemed, and the galaxy would soon learn that too. Asterisk, the ship floated in silence. Near the rings of a dead planet, Reed had cut all power, masked their signal, and covered every reflective panel. But still, they came. The silent ship that had followed them for days was no longer hiding. It now hovered close, watching, waiting, inside. The girl sat on the floor, her arms wrapped around her legs. Her eyes didn't blink. She could feel something, some presence out there that made her skin tighten. Do you know them? Reed asked, his voice low. She nodded barely. not their faces. But they're feeling, she whispered, like shadows I can't escape. Suddenly alarms flashed red. The enemy ship fired a pulse, no damage, just a warning. Then a message came through. Audio only, sharp and cold. Release the Solar unit, or we will breach your hull. Reed looked at her. She looked back with fear, but not surprise. She stood, shaky but determined. They've come for me before, she said slowly. They always come when I start to feel strong. Why? Reed asked. What are you to them? She touched the bracelet on her wrist, the neural stabilizer. And then she said something he hadn't expected. I was born in a lab. Reed's heart sank. She continued, voice trembling. They created me, trained me, hurt me. I escaped once. But they always found me, so they sold me as a broken slave, thinking I'd die. Red clenched his fists. They thought wrong, he said. The enemy ship fired a second pulse. This time it hit hard. The hull shook. Lights flickered. Panels sparked. They're boarding, Reed said, grabbing a small blaster. He turned to her. Get to the escape pod. No, she said quickly. If I leave, they'll chase you instead. Her voice was steady for the first time. I won't run again. Footsteps echoed in the ship's corridor. Heavy boots, synchronized movement. No shouting, just deadly silence. Reed set his back to the wall near the door. The girl stood. In the middle of the room, eyes closed, breathing deep. Then the door burst open. 3 masked figures in black armor stormed in, weapons raised. One of them spoke in a voice like glass cracking. Subject Solara 7, you are ordered to deactivate. And surrender, but something was different. The girl didn't flinch. Her eyes opened and they glowed. Bright silver light burst from her body. The walls shook. The attackers froze mid-step, their suits flickering with static. One of them screamed, dropping his weapon. Another was thrown against the wall by a sudden, invisible force. Reed could only stare. She wasn't just a broken girl. She was powerful, but the power wasn't wild this time. It was focused, controlled. She raised one hand. And the last soldier fell to his knees, his armor locking shut. Then everything went quiet again. Only the hum of the ship and the sound of her breathing filled the room. Reed slowly walked over. Her glow faded. Her shoulders dropped. I didn't mean to hurt them, she said softly, but they would have taken me. You didn't hurt them, Reed said. You protected yourself. He looked around at the defeated soldiers, unconscious but alive. He did more than most trained soldiers could do. She looked down at her hands. I don't understand. What I am, she whispered. Red placed a hand gently on her shoulder. We'll find out, he said together. The ship's system beeped. More vessels were entering the area. They're not done, Reed muttered. He turned back to her. We need answers before they come again. She nodded. I think I know where we can go. Ain't, she said. A place where my kind once lived. If any still exist, Reed didn't hesitate, then that's where we're going. Outside, the enemy ship powered down. Their boarding crew defeated, but others were on the way. Faster, stronger, and more prepared, they had failed to retrieve. The girl once, and now. They would stop at nothing to erase her from the galaxy. But this time, she wouldn't run. This time, she had someone who believed she was worth saving. The ship was broken, but still flying. Sparks popped from ceiling wires. The engines groaned with every turn. Reed worked fast, his hands covered in grease, sweat dripping down his face. But his eyes kept glancing at her again and again. She was different now. Quieter, yes, but also calmer. The fear in her eyes had started to fade, replaced by something else, something stronger. They were heading to a forgotten world one she had seen only in dreams, a planet called Siren. Hidden in the mist belt beyond Sector 9, she didn't know if anyone still lived there. But a voice inside her whispered that answers waited in its ruins. Reed didn't question her choice. He trusted her now, and she trusted him. More than she had ever trusted anyone. She helped where she could, organizing tools, checking panels, cleaning up wires. Each task made her feel real again, useful, alive. But the closer they got to Siren, the more pressure built inside her. She began waking from nightmares, flashes of metal rooms, glowing needles, voices shouting commands, pain, always pain.
Hours.
Found her one morning curled in a corner, hands shaking, placed a blanket around her and said nothing, just sat nearby. That quiet moment meant more to her than any words ever could. But peace didn't last. Not in this galaxy. Not when something powerful was trying to rise. It began with a strange signal, high-pitched hum that came from deep space, too distant for normal sensors. Reed traced it, eyes narrowing. It's not natural. He said, "It's targeting us." Then the alarm screamed. 3 enemy ships dropped out of warp behind them, no warnings, no messages, only red weapons charging in the dark. "Get to the safe room," Reed ordered, running to the controls. But she didn't move. Instead, she walked to the cockpit, her hands clenched, eyes glowing softly. "They don't want to capture me anymore," she said, voice cold. "They want to erase me." The ship rocked as the first blast hit, panels shattered. Fire burst from a side vent. Reed flew backward into the wall, hitting hard. Blood dripped from his forehead, and he groaned in pain. The girl screamed, not with fear, but with something deeper, emotion mixed with pure instinct. Her body lit up like a star. Not just her skin, everything. Silver threads of light danced around her. Circling like a storm, then everything stopped. Time felt slow, frozen, the fires halted, the shaking stopped. And even the enemy ships seemed to pause in space. Red watched through blurry eyes as she stepped forward. No weapons, no armor, just glowing light, and with one wave of her hand, shield burst from the ship, a glowing wall of energy wrapped around them like a protective dome outside. The enemy ships fired again, but their beams bounced off harmlessly. She turned her eyes to the stars, and the nearest ship suddenly shut down. Its engines froze, lights flickered, and it drifted dead in space. The second ship turned to flee, the third hesitated. Then followed inside the ship, she collapsed to her knees. The glow dimmed and she gasped for air. Red crawled toward her, blood still dripping. "You stopped them," he whispered, stunned. I didn't know I could," she said, her voice breaking. Tears filled her eyes. "I thought I was just a test subject." "No," Reed said, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You're more than they ever imagined." She sobbed into his chest, not from pain, but from release. For the first time in her life, she felt powerful, not used, not broken, not controlled. Just her, but they both knew this was only the beginning. What she did today would be seen, recorded, feared. Ones who created her would come again with stronger ships. Deadlier plans. Reed wiped the blood from his brow and smiled slightly. "Remind me never to get on your bad side," he joked. She laughed. A soft sound like music in the middle of chaos. "You saved me," she whispered. I think you saved me first," he replied. Outside, the stars shined quietly, but far in the distance. Dark ships were moving again. Whispers of the celery girl had begun to spread, and some would stop at nothing to silence the light she had just awakened. The ship drifted through deep space, silent, hidden, wounded, but alive, inside. The girl sat in the control chair. Her eyes half closed, her hands still glowing faintly. Reed lay on the nearby bed. Wrapped in bandages, breathing slowly, he was alive but barely. The last fight had taken everything. And now they were running out of time. She kept her eyes on the radar. Watching for more ships, none came for now. But she knew they would. They always did. She touched the small device on her wrist, the stabilizer. It hummed softly, trying to calm the energy inside her. But something had changed. Her powers were growing too fast. Too wild, and the worst part, she had started remembering. It came in dreams at first. Cold lights, long tables, machines buzzing, voices some kind, most cruel. They called her Prototype 7. Not a name, a project. One voice stood out. A woman's voice, soft but filled with authority. "She will never be human," the woman said. "She is designed to be controlled." That voice haunted her more than the pain ever did. She looked at Reed, still unconscious. He had never tried to control her. He gave her food, safety, and the one thing no one else ever gave: choice. She stood slowly, moving to the computer terminal. She began digging into the files again, this time, deeper. She broke through hidden layers in the data Reed had saved from her old collar, and there it was, a symbol, a location, a name, Lab 7 Cedar Axis Station. Her body went cold. Taraxis wasn't just any place. It was where she had been made, trained, and broken, and maybe where others like her were still trapped. She walked back to Reed and knelt beside him. I have to go there, she whispered, even if I'm afraid. I have to know if I was the only one. Suddenly, an alert flashed red across the screen. Another ship had locked onto their position fast and closing in, but this time, it wasn't a warship. It was small, unarmed, a cargo runner. Sending a private code friendly, she responded, voice shaking. This is Prototype Sci. She stopped herself. This is Celine, she said, choosing the name at that moment. The voice that answered was rough, tired, but kind. You don't sound like a slave, the stranger said. I'm not anymore, she replied. The ship docked carefully, and a short alien stepped through the hatch. Gray skin, wide eyes, no weapons. I used to be like you, he said, looking at her carefully. I'm thrown away because I was different. Celine stared at him, unsure if she could trust him. But something in his voice felt true. What do you want? She asked. He smiled. Sad and knowing, to help you break the cage. He explained everything. Taraxis wasn't just a lab. It was the center of the Solari suppression program. Dozens of test subjects had once lived. Some escaped, and he didn't. Celine might not be the only one left. They keep them in cryo, frozen, he said, waiting for orders from the council. Selena's hands trembled. How do I get in? He opened a small case, showing a chip. This will unlock the gates, but it'll trigger alarms. You'll have only minutes. Reed groaned softly from the bed. Waking slowly, Celine rushed to him. Holding his hand gently, we found where they made me, she whispered. I want to go. Reed opened his eyes fully and nodded. I'll go with you, he said. No, she whispered. You're not strong enough yet, he smiled weakly. You are, that night. She stood in the hangar with the stranger's small stealth ship behind her. Reed handed her a small device. It's a pulse beacon. He said, if it gets bad, press it. I'll come. She hugged him. A real hugger, first ever. I won't let them take me again, she promised. As the ship launched, Celine sat in the pilot seat, her heart pounded. She was flying toward the place that tried to destroy her. But this time, she was not a number, not a slave, not a forgotten project. This time, she was a storm, and Taraxis would never forget her name again. Taraxis Station rose from the dark clouds like a tower of metal and sorrow. Cold lights flickered across its armor, and giant doors sealed away every secret within to most of the galaxy. It was just another research hub, but Celine knew the truth. This was where they made her. This was where they left her to rot. Now, she had returned not as a slave, but as a flame they could no longer extinguish. The stealth ship slipped past the outer sensors. Hidden by its cloaking core, Celine moved through the shadows. Faster, bolder than before, she had no fear, no only purpose. She reached the inner vaults, where the sleeping pods lined the walls like tombs. Each pod held someone like her, young, silent, forgotten, their faces peaceful, but their lives stolen before they even began. She touched one of the pods. Inside was a girl no older than herself, skin pale blue, eyes shut tight. A number was etched into the glass. Solari 12. I'm not leaving you, Celine whispered. Not this time. A voice echoed through the chamber, sharp, familiar, cold. Well, you made it back, said the woman from her dreams, stepping out of the shadows. Celine turned slowly. The woman was older now, hair gray at the tips, but her eyes still cold. Still cruel. You were our greatest creation, the woman said, but you were never meant to think. Selena's glow returned soft at first. Then brighter with every breath. I was never yours, she said quietly. The woman raised a small device, some kind of control chip, and let's fix that, she hissed, pressing the button. A sharp pain sliced through Selena's head. She dropped to her knees, screaming. The old codes still lived inside her, buried deep, pulling at her mind. But something else lived there now too. Reed's voice, her name, her choice. I am Celine. She growled through clenched teeth. I choose who I am, with one final breath. She reached deep inside herself and shattered the command code with pure energy. The device sparked and exploded in the woman's hand. She stumbled back, eyes wide with fear. "No," the woman whispered. "That's not possible," Celine stood tall, her body glowing like a star ready to burst. "It is now," she said, with a wave of her hand. The pod doors began to open. One by one, the other Solari woke, blinking slowly, confused. They saw her standing between them and their prison. "You're free," Celine said, her voice shaking. With emotion, "They can't control us anymore." The alarms blared, footsteps raced toward the vault. Armed guards poured into the room, shouting, weapons raised. But Celine didn't step back. She stepped forward. The energy around her exploded outward, not to destroy, but to shield. The guards' weapons jammed. Their armor failed, their helmets cracked from the pressure. No one was hurt, but none could stand. The Solari children behind her watched in awe. One stepped forward, then another, until they all stood behind Celine, silent but strong. The woman crawled backward, eyes wide with disbelief. "You were nothing," she whispered. "You were a failed project." Celine looked down at her. "No," she said. "I was the one you left behind." She turned to the others and raised her hand high. "Let's go home," she said. They moved together, not as prisoners, not as projects, but as people. Reed's ship arrived just as they reached the surface. He stepped out, eyes still bruised, but filled with pride. "You did it," he said. Voice breaking, Celine ran to him, wrapping her arms around him tight. "We did," she said. "All of us." The Solari stood behind them, no longer afraid. Each carried the glow now, small but growing, like stars that had been hidden too long in the dark. News of the Taraxis break spread across the galaxy. People who had forgotten the Solari name now spoke it with respect. And fear, some still wanted them gone, but others offered help, hope. Celine led them all not as a weapon, not as a tool, but as a leader, a voice. A symbol of something greater, the one they called worthless. The one they sold for a single coin had become the one they now followed. The one who reminded the stars that even the forgotten can rise, that even the broken can shine, and that humanity, in its quiet kindness, can change the fate of an entire species.